In 1934, a laid-off machinist in Youngstown, Ohio, kept his family of 6 warm through an Appalachian winter on 40 cents worth of hardware. No new tools, no trip to the store. A pocket knife, a spool of copper wire, and a jar of bent nails he had straightened on the back porch. He was not unusual. Across America, millions who had lost jobs and savings turned their toolboxes into survival kits. They did not repair things, they resurrected them. Number 22 kept farmhouses from burning down on January nights. Number 9 was a pencil trick that opened almost any stuck lock in the county. And number 1 has been so completely forgotten that most homeowners would pay a handyman $200 to solve a problem their great-grandfather solved in 11 seconds with a pencil. These 25 secrets were not hacks. They were the quiet education of a generation that could not afford to fail. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 25 lost handyman secrets from the Great Depression that America forgot. Number 25, the bar of soap drawer fix. This was the repair that said the drawer sticks, and I am not buying a new cabinet. A stub of Fell's naphtha, 3 cents at the A&P, rubbed hard along the wooden runners. Make 10 passes with heavy pressure. The drawer slid back in and glided. For a factory wife in Gary, Indiana, this was a minute's work and a season's relief. The wax in the tallow filled the soft pine and kept it quiet. Mothers taught this to daughters the same year they taught them to bake bread. It cost almost nothing and lasted a year. Number 24, the newspaper window seal. A pane of replacement glass cost 35 cents, plus a trip to town. A cracked window in November meant a week of waiting. The fix was yesterday's paper and flour paste. Flour and water were stirred over low heat until glassy. Newspaper was torn into strips, brushed with the paste, and laid across the crack in 3 layers, inside and out. Left to dry overnight. The draft stopped. A kitchen window patched in October held until April. Across the coal fields of West Virginia, this was the repair of the first hard frost. It was ugly, it was free, and it made the difference between 58 degrees and 38. Number 23, straightening bent nails on the back porch. Every Depression workshop kept a coffee can of bent nails pulled from torn-down crates. The tool was a flat iron turned upside down. 3 taps with a hammer, lighter each time, starting at the bend. The nail came back straight enough to drive. A boy of 9 could produce 100 usable nails on a Saturday morning. For his father, those nails were a patched barn door, a fixed porch rail. Every farmhouse in Nebraska had a can like this. The nails were never pretty. They held anyway. Number 22, the penny fuse. A blown fuse on a February blizzard night meant 2 miles of gravel road you could not drive. The trick was a copper penny dropped into the empty socket with the blown fuse screwed on top. The circuit closed and the pump ran. Every farmer also knew the penny had to come out at first light, because a penny does not blow. It carries current until the wire in the wall starts smoldering. This saved more animals from frozen barns than any other trick on this list, and it caused more barn fires. Both were true. The farmers who used it never forgot to remove it. It bought you 1 night, and never more than 1. Number 21, potato on the broken bulb. A bulb shattered in the socket, the brass base still seized inside. A housewife in St. Louis, with her husband 3 states away, did not wait. Turn the breaker off first, always. Then half a raw potato pressed hard into the jagged socket and was twisted counterclockwise. The starch gripped the brass. 2 turns, and the base came out in the potato. A kitchen staple solved a hardware problem. Electricians still use this trick when nobody is watching. A potato cost a penny. A finger cost everything. Number 20. Candle wax on the wood screw. A screw that would not turn in dry oak was called a dry screw. The fix was a stub of tallow candle from the kitchen shelf. The screw was drawn halfway out, rubbed twice across the candle, then driven home without a fight. The wax lubricated the threads, and it also sealed them against moisture. In New England boat shops, every toolbox held a candle stub for this reason. A penny's worth of wax made a 3-cent screw do the work of a 10-cent screw. Number 19. The copper wire splice. When the cord on the work lamp frayed, nobody bought a new one. They stripped the rubber back an inch with a pocket knife, careful not to nick the copper. The bare ends were overlapped and twisted tight with pliers, then wrapped with tape, then a rubber bicycle inner tube, then tape again. For a machinist in Detroit, that splice lasted 20 years. The key was the triple wrap. In the Depression, every basement held a cord spliced 3 times. The lamp kept working. Nothing was thrown away because nothing had to be. Number 18. The lead pencil in the stuck lock. A skeleton key that would not turn was not a broken lock. It was a dry one. The repair was a soft pencil, never oil. Oil attracted dust and froze the lock tighter within a month. The pencil was rubbed across the cut edges of the key, coating every notch with graphite. The key slipped in, turned once, came out. 2 more turns, and the lock opened. Museums still use this method on 19th-century locks today. In 1934, the pencil lived on the shelf next to the front door. Number 17. The cornmeal drain cleaner. A slow kitchen drain was not a plumber's bill. It was half a cup of dry cornmeal, a spoonful of baking soda, and a kettle of boiling water poured slow and steady. The cornmeal scoured the pipe walls. The soda cut the grease. For a boarding house in Scranton feeding 12 men 3 meals a day, the drain got this treatment every Sunday. It never clogged. Modern drain cleaners arrived in the 1940s and made this trick disappear. The pipes did not get any better. The marketing did. Number 16. The newspaper knife sharpener. A dull knife did not go to the grinder if a dime was not in the jar. It went to the back page of yesterday's paper, 8 layers, folded flat. The knife was drawn across at a shallow angle, with the edge trailing 20 strokes per side. The trick was the kaolin clay in the 1930s newsprint, which acted as a polishing compound. A knife that would not slice a tomato came back sharp enough to shave hair. Butchers in Chicago kept stacks on their stations. Sharpening was not a service. It was a habit. Number 15. The shoe polish furniture repair trick. A scratch across a walnut table was not a refinishing job. It was a tin of brown kiwi and a piece of flannel. A smear of paste polish worked into the grain with a fingertip, buffed off 5 minutes later. The scratch disappeared into the grain pattern. For a widow in Boston selling her husband's bedroom set to pay the rent, a dime of polish turned a damaged dresser into a sellable one. Auction houses used this trick openly in 1933 and secretly in 1953. Most homeowners today have forgotten it exists. Number 14. The vinegar rust soak. A rusted hand tool was not a tool to replace. A rusted plane dropped into a mason jar of white vinegar. 3 days, sometimes 5. Vinegar ate the iron oxide and left the steel behind. Scrubbed with crumpled aluminum foil, dried, rubbed with bacon grease. A ruined plane came back as a working plane. Every tool bench in the machine shops of Milwaukee had a jar of vinegar under it. Nothing rusted was ever thrown away because vinegar was patient enough to undo the damage. Pattern break 1 in 4 American households in 1933 did not have a working telephone. 3 in 4 could not afford a professional service call of any kind. A plumber cost $2 an hour. An electrician cost the same. In a country where a quarter of the labor force was unemployed, the only repairman most families could afford was the one who lived in the house. What that person knew was not written in a book. It was passed across back fences, learned from an uncle, remembered from a grandmother who had survived the winter of 1888. When the Depression ended, that knowledge did not die. It was shoved aside. New stores sold new tools. Advertisements told people a real man called a professional. A pencil in a lock was poverty. A newspaper on a window was failure. The marketing worked. The knowledge faded. The people who still know these tricks are almost all over 80 years old. Number 13. The ash and lye stove cleaner. A cast iron stove caked with a year of grease was cleaned with what the stove had already produced. Hardwood ash, sifted through a flour sieve, was mixed with water into a gray paste. It was rubbed on, left 10 minutes, then wiped off. The lye in the ash broke down the grease. For a farm wife in Illinois, this was Saturday's chore before Sunday's dinner. Commercial oven cleaners arrived in the 1950s and buried this method. The ash was always there, free, and stronger than anything sold in a can. Number 12. The soapstone window cure. A sash window that squealed was not warped, it was dry. A lump of soft soapstone rubbed along the sash channels left a thin film of talc, no grease and no dust magnet. The sash rose silently for 2 years. For a landlord in Baltimore, the soapstone lived in his back pocket. A silent window was a happy tenant. By 2023, most homeowners bought silicone spray instead and were puzzled when it attracted dirt. Dry beat wet every time. Number 11. The string and nail plumb line. A carpenter in 1934, hanging a door, did not pull out a laser level. He drove a nail into the top of the frame, tied kitchen twine to it, and weighted the twine with a threaded nut. When the twine stopped swaying, it pointed true. For a framer in rural Georgia, the plumb line was more accurate than a bubble level and cost nothing. Gravity did the work. Every house built this way between 1800 and 1950 still stands square a century later. A nut on a string told you more than a tool salesman ever would. Number 10. The kerosene paintbrush preserve. A good brush cost 60 cents. A brush left hard was a 60-cent loss. At the end of a painting day, the brush was lowered into a pint jar of kerosene, the bristles submerged, and the handle suspended by a slit of cardboard across the mouth. The kerosene kept the oil paint from curing for months. For a house painter in Minneapolis, keeping 6 brushes alive for 6 colors, the kerosene jar was his most important equipment. 1 pint saved a dozen brushes a year. Number 9. The wet newspaper floor stripper. An old wooden floor, coated in darkened wax, was not scrubbed with lye. It was covered in wet newspaper. Sections were laid flat across the planks, soaked with a warm mop, and left for an hour. The moisture softened the wax from above. The pulp absorbed it. The paper came up dark gray, heavy with the dirt of 30 years. The floor dried 3 shades lighter and took fresh wax like a new board. Landladies in Philadelphia used this every spring. It cost the price of last week's paper. A 1933 toilet flushed 5 gallons every time. A clean red brick laid in the ceramic tank displaced a quart per flush. For a family of 5, flushing 40 times a day, that was 10 gallons saved daily. 300 gallons a month. The water bill dropped by a third, and nobody noticed a difference in the plumbing. Decades later, the water utilities themselves would recommend the same trick. A free brick saved a paid gallon. Number 7. The banana peel leather polish. A pair of work boots was not thrown out because the leather had cracked. The inside of a ripe banana peel was rubbed across the dry leather, every inch. The potassium and natural oils fed back into it. It was buffed with a cotton rag 5 minutes later. The boots came up dark and supple. For a steel worker in Bethlehem who could not afford new $3 boots, a 1-cent banana stretched another season of hours on the mill floor. Nothing in a Depression kitchen was trash until every part had done a second job. Number 6. The salt and lemon copper cleaner. A tarnished copper kettle was not one to replace. Half a lemon, dipped heavily into kitchen salt, was rubbed firmly across the copper in small circles. The acid dissolved the oxide. The salt scoured it loose. Rinsed and buffed with a flour sack towel, the copper came up bright pink. For a grandmother in Milwaukee polishing a kettle from her 1898 wedding, this was the ritual every Saturday. Commercial cleaners arrived in the 1950s and sold for 49 cents. The lemon and salt did the same work for 4 cents. Number 5. The clothespin and hide glue handle repair. A wooden chisel handle split down the grain did not mean the tool was lost. The split was coaxed open with a knife point. A drop of warm hide glue was run into the crack. Then 2 spring clothespins were clamped across from opposite sides. String was wound around in a crisscross and tied off. It cured for 24 hours. Hide glue gripped tighter than the fibers it replaced. This trick was used on hammer handles, axe handles, saw handles, and hoe handles. The glue pot was often the first tool a craftsman lit in the morning. Number 4. The sewing machine drive belt. A leather belt on a shop motor snapped. A new belt was 85 cents and a 2-week wait. The fix was already in the house, on the singer in the parlor. A foot of the treadle machine's round leather cord was cut off and spliced closed with a brass staple. The sewing machine kept its belt a foot shorter and kept sewing. The shop motor ran by dinner time. For a cobbler in Cleveland repairing shoes at 15 cents a sole, this kept the business open. Nothing in a Depression household belonged to only one machine. Number 3. The coffee can chimney sweep. A chimney sweep charged $1. $1 was 2 days of groceries. The homemade sweep was a brick wrapped in a sandbag, tied to a length of hay baling chain. It was lowered from the roof, down the flue, bumped against the walls in a steady rhythm, and then drawn back up. The soot cascaded into a waiting sheet below. For a coal-burning stove in a Pittsburgh row house, this was an annual October chore. A creosote fire in a neglected flue was how houses burned down in January. The families who did this had none. Number 2. The baking soda battery revival. A lead-acid car battery cost $6. A battery covered in white acid crust was not dead. It was dirty. A tablespoon of baking soda in a cup of warm water was worked across the terminals with a stiff brush. The mixture fizzed, neutralizing the acid. After rinsing and drying, the terminals came up clean gray. 8 times out of 10, the engine fired on the first crank. The problem had never been the battery. It had been the corrosion. Every mechanic in America kept a yellow arm and hammer box on the bench. It was the first thing you tried before you admitted the battery was finished. Number 1. The pencil and the stuck screw. The simplest repair on this list. The humblest, the one most completely erased from the American hardware store, and the one that more than any other defined the Depression-era handyman. A wood screw that refused to drive into fresh lumber was not a bad screw. It was a dry one. The fix was a plain yellow number 2 pencil from the kitchen drawer, sharpened with a pocket knife until an inch of graphite was exposed. The screw started by hand, 1 or 2 turns. The pencil lead rubbed hard against the threads, coating every groove. The screw went the rest of the way home without the smallest complaint. A pencil cost a penny. The repair took 11 seconds. It worked in oak, pine, maple, cherry, walnut. It worked on brass screws, steel screws, the cheap zinc screws salvaged from torn-down crates. It never failed. For a tenant farmer in eastern Kentucky patching his own porch rail on a Saturday afternoon in October 1934, this was the repair that said the day had been long, the wood was hard, the screws were stubborn, and the rail was going to be fixed before supper anyway. For a widow in rural Maine fixing her own storm window. For a mill worker in North Carolina hanging a shelf in a tenant shack. The pencil was the tool that said a 90-year-old man who could not grip a power drill could still do his own repairs. It cost almost nothing. It required almost nothing. It asked almost nothing. And it kept a generation of American households in working order through a decade that should have broken them. These 25 secrets were not shortcuts. They were the distilled competence of a generation that had been told by an entire economy they were on their own. A potato on a broken bulb, a pencil in a stuck lock, a brick in a toilet tank, a banana peel on a cracked boot. These were not compromises. They were the correct answers, reached by a generation that could not afford wrong ones. The tricks cost less than $1. The self-reliance cost nothing at all. We called it making do. They called it Tuesday. They were right, and we have almost forgotten.